That'd be good if we had
And
someone.
Lena, who else responded? FX said he joined by Zoom.
Have a second, hold on.
Tom, the movie guy?
No, Nancy.
I think so, that's what his name says.
So probably in person was Dan, Lynn, and hopefully Gabrielle.
Okay,
So Dan and Lynn were expected to come, and FX was supposed to be on Zoom.
all right, well, we'll see who shows up.
So who's,
He's a, I don't know, person, he's from Rights and Democracy, I think. He has
who's from what's that?
Rights and Democracy, I believe, right?
Some organization in Burlington,
What is that?
Burlington-based housing advocacy activists.
I mean, we can ask him to
Activism,
introduce
something.
himself and his affiliation.
Yeah, that'll be fine. All right, got 5 seconds.
Joe, you gonna say the Pledge of Allegiance?
Absolutely.
All right, good. Okay, well, I think, can people hear me on Zoom? Are we live yet?
You ready to go?
Ready to go.
You're on?
All right. Okay, I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Hartford Selectboard on Tuesday, December 6, 2022 at 6 p.m. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, and Joe Major has been kind enough to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Major.
All right, I don't see any changes to the order of agenda, so we will next move to public comment. As usual, we'll start with people in the room, and then we'll go to people who are joining us by Zoom. You'll have 5 minutes to make your comments. We ask that you introduce yourself and your village, town of residence, and no personal attacks. And it looks like we have Joe at the lectern, so Joe?
I'll try not the personal.
Okay, thank you.
And the 5 minutes, with the keeper of the clock here, so please.
That's true, we don't have the keeper of the clock,
Bear with
so
me here.
We'll do our best.
I know that I have a couple of things to talk about today, and I know that, I don't think it's any secret that Hartford has hit a little bit of a rough patch. And I was going through the website, and something stuck out to me and made me feel a little better about the direction that we are going. And it's the number of women that we have in leadership positions. As I look at the dais, I see Allie and Mary and Kim, our administrative leadership, and Paula and Gail. And Gail's so nice, she's doing things twice and is in finance as well. If you went to the election, you saw that our clerk and Lisa and Sherry are doing a magnificent job planning with Lori and Joanne. Our police is being run by Connie, so much so that the union said that they want her to take over. This is a pretty good time in Hartford because it is showing how progressive we can be. And I'm proud of the community that I'm in right now. Now, I will say this, and the second thing I want to talk about is something that's a bit disheartening, and it is the vitriol that the Upper Valley Haven has been taking as of late. Its mission, and its only mission, is to help people. That's it. No matter what your circumstance, their mission is to help people. If you are hungry, they will feed you. If you are cold, they will clothe you. If you have a problem, they will help you and direct you in the way that you need to be directed. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. And yet, such anger has been directed at them because they wanted to put housing together for people who are less fortunate than us. Now, they may not have done it in the conventional way, and they may have had some missteps in communication, but all they wanted to do was help people. That's it. That's all. Nothing more. Didn't ask for anything. And I've seen such anger, so much so that someone even suggested that all of our homeless problems and all of our problems as far as automobiles being in parking spots that they're not supposed to is their fault, and they should pay for it. That was sad, and it's disheartening. It's disheartening for this community. Now, I understand some people around that area have experienced difficulties. But if we talk about fact versus feelings, if you look at crime in that area compared to other areas of our community, it's no more. No more. I'm lucky that the Haven is in our community. And other organizations like WISE. Because all they want to do is to help people. And that's it. Because by the grace of God go I could be one of those people that have to ask for that help. This community is better because they're in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Anyone else in the room? Doesn't look like that. Do we have anyone on Zoom?
No hands up at the moment.
Okay. Well, we will conclude public comment. We'll move to charter review. So one of the main sort of purposes of this, yes, Kim?
Before we begin, Mr. Chair, can I ask the board's consensus? I want to disclose the fact that I am a rental property manager, co-owner. I think there could be a perceived conflict of interest around the just cause eviction discussion. If there's consensus for me to recuse myself, I would do that. What I thought I would request is if the board and the public would be comfortable with me participating in that conversation, but maybe abstaining if there's a vote. Does anyone object to that?
I don't see any objections. I think that would be fine.
Yeah, for me, I don't think I personally wouldn't have an issue with you voting anyway. I mean, some of us, I rent, for example, so I think there's going to be people on both sides of that.
Yeah, and I think it would be important to get perspectives from both sides as well as we discuss this. We're not voting on anything tonight, that so that's something, when we actually come to a vote, if you feel like you would be more comfortable recusing yourself, I think that would be fine.
Great.
But we would appreciate the insight from everyone, if you have either a landlord or a tenant relationship. So I think that's...
And there is now a hand up. I don't know if it's charter related or public comment.
Let's take it and see what it is.
Mike, if your comment is a general public comment, go ahead. If it's relating to the charter, then we should wait till after our discussion. Mike Morris.
Hi, Mike.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, I just, in question to Kim's question about her being a landlord, she's also a liquor control license holder, and she doesn't vote or comment on any of the licenses because of conflict of interest. And I think being a landlord would be the same general level of conflict of interest. So she asked her opinion, and that's my opinion. I think she should refrain from commenting on any of it, like she would as a control license. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. All right, so are we ready to move on to the sort of the substance of this? There's a little sort of throat clearing that needs to be done before we get into this. So we're here tonight. We've got people from the Charter Committee, and I think this is a good opportunity for the Select Board to ask questions about certain provisions, if we need more information on something. One of the main things we want to do, at least I was interested in, was hearing more about just cause eviction. That is a provision that's included in the charter, and it's one that, you know, I'm not particularly familiar with what the intent of it is or what it would actually do, so I think it would be helpful to hear some more about that. So we have Tom Proctor, who will come on and just give us a brief overview of that. Then I think if we have other questions about provisions in the charter, this is a good time to ask those questions, since we have charter members here. Like I said, there won't be a vote on this tonight, but this is just sort of a first step of giving us some more information so that we feel like, you know, we understand what's in there. And as we move towards an eventual vote, I think that'll help shape any changes we make to this. One sort of procedural thing that did come up, and that was looked at by VLCT and our municipal attorney, is that if you look at the language in our current charter and you read it particularly strictly, it could be interpreted to mean that the charter committee gives us recommendations, and once we receive those are going to be on the next ballot. It doesn't necessarily carve out in the strict reading of it any role for the select board to revise, amend, delete portions of the charter. Now, that is not my understanding of what probably the charter committee thought the process would be, and I don't think it's the select board's understanding. So one thing our municipal attorney suggested is that a way forward, a workaround on this would be that the committee would draw the draft as an official recommendation. The draft is essentially left with the select board, and then working under the normal processes that are spelled out in Vermont's statutes, we would be able to amend the recommendation, the draft, as we wanted to before it went out and was warned and placed on a ballot. So that's where we sort of are with that right now. So just a procedural matter we're going to have to you know, follow up on and just make sure that the intent of the charter committee and the intent or the common understanding of what the select board would do with the draft charter is something that we can follow. So that's kind of where we are with that. But otherwise, we're going to, you know, dive into this and, you know, get some more information, have our questions answered, hopefully, so that at a future date we can, you know, agree upon what we think the revisions to the charter should be, and then move forward with a vote on that. And so, like I mentioned, one particular area of interest for the board was the inclusion of the just cause eviction provisions in the charter. And we have Tom Proctor here, and he's going to give us a brief overview of what those provisions do and sort of the intent of them. We can ask questions of Tom, and certainly any members of the committee who have any insight they'd like to share are welcome to come up to the microphone and comment. So if we can bring Tom over, that would be great.
Were you going to do staff's concerns after this?
Yeah, let's start with this because this seems like a big one, and then we can go up with some of, we can follow up with some of the other questions, I think.
Okay.
Good evening. Is this the right time? Would you like to come in now, or
This
always?
is fine, and if you can identify yourself, and if you are affiliated with a particular organization, please let us know what that organization is.
Of course.
And if you could speak into the microphone a little more, sorry.
I apologize. Can everyone hear me okay?
Pretty well.
Pretty well. It's a little soft. You might, I'm not going to tell you to yell, but you might speak as loud as you're comfortable with.
No worries. I can use my announcer voice if that helps a little bit.
Sure, absolutely.
So good evening, Hartford Selectboard. Thank you for inviting me to speak this evening on rental protections. My name is Tom Proctor. I'm the Housing Justice Organiser for Rights and Democracy.
Okay.
I am very grateful to the Hartford Charter Commission for inviting me to speak to them. And I was thrilled when they elected to add a just cause eviction language to the 2023 charter change proposal on a 5-2 vote. To let you know why this policy is so important and why we now have statewide support for just cause eviction, I want to speak on the current state of rental housing across Vermont. And if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to share my screen, and I hope you'll be able to see it where you are.
Sure.
Give me a quick moment. Hoping everyone can see that.
Yep, I can see it.
Excellent. So my work with rights and democracy has placed me on the front row in escalating crisis. Vermont's directly affecting nearly a third of state residents who rent their homes. A crisis that, if left to continue, will affect every single one of us in the near future. The issues of rental housing in Vermont are multifaceted. They have created a perfect storm that's led to catastrophic damage to housing stability and availability. The first major issue is lack of supply. In the last 30 years, the growth of available homes has plummeted, with just 0.1% of additional rental housing coming online between 2010 and 2017. This lack of availability has been compounded by a pandemic and climate migration. In 2021, for the first time in decades, Vermont saw a net increase in new residents. The socio-economic makeup of this population growth is likely to be middle and upper middle class. Despite the first net growth of the Vermont population in decades, job availability is still at post-pandemic levels, suggesting there has been no growth in labour force participation. This has also led to a sharp increase in homes that are vacant but unavailable. As Vermont becomes more attractive to real estate investors and second homeowners, our available housing stock has dwindled. For every 4 houses that exist in Vermont, 1 of them is vacant for the majority of the year, leading to a statewide vacancy rate for available houses to be at catastrophically low levels. A healthy availability rate for the housing market is 6%. Vermont's vacancy rate in 2021 sat at 2.4%, with experts expecting this to fall further in 2023. A tight housing market led to exploding house prices, with the lower end of the market seeing the largest rise in prices. According to a Burlington Free Press report, the median sale price for a single-family home rose 16% in 2021 to $382,750.
Oh, indeed.
Putting further pressure on an already overbuilt market.
Hey, Tom?
In short, yes.
Yep, sorry, your Zoom lost for about 10 or 15 seconds. If you could just sort of recap the last paragraph or whatever.
So, according to a Burlington Free Press report, the median price of a single-family home rose more than 16% in 2021 to $382,000, meaning renters looking to own their own homes have found it increasingly difficult to do so, putting further pressure on an already overburdened rental market. In short, we don't have enough available houses, we're not creating enough new houses, and the demand is only getting higher. This has put enormous financial strain on renters who are seeing their rents raised at precipitous levels due to a severely limited market, leading to mass evictions as landlords seek to find richer tenants. The 2020 Vermont Housing Needs Assessment, written before pandemic trends took.
Tom, you're freezing again. Is there a way that you can turn off your video but still keep your screen share on?
I'm sorry, did I?
Yeah, it's kind of coming in and out for the last 30 seconds or so.
We seem to be having some trouble here, it seems.
Yep, a little bit. We're trying to think if there's a way.
Cut down the video.
Were we sent this PowerPoint?
No.
No.
We could sort this out. If I call in, I can send over the PowerPoint for folks to look over at a later date, but I can just kind of keep going the equipment that I have.
I wonder if you close the PowerPoint and just spoke to us and then sent it to us. If you can just, give us your thoughts verbally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that'll probably be helpful.
Okay, yeah, let's try that. I am sorry about the internet connectivity issues. It seems to be whenever it rains, my internet starts failing for some reason. So according to the Vermont Housing Needs Assessment, which was written before the pandemic took hold, showed that half of renters in Vermont spend over 30% of their take-home income on rent. Of that 50% that spends over half of their take-home income on rent, 50% of those, 50% of those spend half of their take-home income on rent. So 25% of people spend over 30% of their income on rent, and 25% of people spend over 50% of their income on rent. The average renter makes in Vermont is actually $13.
Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt. I can't hold all these numbers in my head as you run through them. I'm getting the general gist of your point. Is this in your PowerPoint? Like, can you email it to us so we can flip through it while you talk us through it?
Yeah, sure. Let me send that across to the thread that I've got. And yeah, I will just kind of skip right to the end here where I kind of go through the language itself.
That would be helpful. I think the PowerPoint can give us a lot of good information on the housing crisis in the state. I think we'd also be interested, I think mainly we're interested in what does this provision do and what is the thinking behind, or what's it intended to remedy?
Absolutely. Okay. I'm just going to skip then right to the actual language itself and why we have written this language the way that we've written it.
Okay.
So if you just give me a quick second.
Yep.
So it is a fairly wonky language. This language was created by Erhard Mankey, who is formerly the executive director of the Vermont Affordable Housing Coalition. He now works as Bernie in the Senate on housing and veteran issues. It was also written by Sarah Carpenter, who was the previous head of Vermont Housing. So some real experts that kind of took part in the actual writing of this ordinance. What this charter sets out to do is basically give you as a select board the power to create a just cause eviction ordinance. It's important to note that even if this passed on the ballot and got past Montpelier and came back to you, you wouldn't actually have to write it at all. Say housing trends completely reversed, there's actually no mandate for you to actually have to write it. Obviously, we would like to see that happen, but it basically gives you the power to write a just cause ordinance. So what a just cause ordinance is it lays out the reasons why someone can be evicted. Right now, it is the landlord can evict for actually no reason at all. When they file for eviction, they can say things like non-payment of rent or a breach of lease, but they can also use no cause. And this is now the most common reason a landlord now evicts. What this ordinance does is it lays out exactly what those reasons are that a landlord can evict for. So the first is a tenant material breach of a written rental agreement. The second is a tenant's violation of state statutes regulating tenant obligations. So that's things like a breach of the peace or doing illegal activity. Third is a non-payment of rent. And the fourth is a tenant's failure to accept written reasonable faith renewal terms. This last part is really important. What this ordinance sets out is that if you are a good tenant, if you pay your rent on time, if you look after the property, you should and be allowed the right of first refusal on a new lease. Now that doesn't mean that a landlord can't change that lease. It doesn't mean a landlord can't increase the rent. And in fact, if they do that and do change the lease and the tenant doesn't in fact re-sign, they can evict. But it does allow tenants that have done nothing wrong the right of first refusal for any new lease. It also sets out to try and protect smaller landlords. We highly recognise that if you live in the unit that you rent out or very close to the property, say you live in you have an ADU, you shouldn't have to be subject to just cause eviction laws because it is, you know, you are selecting the people that you are actually living next to. It's not just a business for you. So in section B, it lays out what reasons you can have for to be exempt. So that is if you do sublease, or if you have in-unit rentals, or if you live in a duplex or a triplex, you rent out the other unit or two units. It also lays out reasons why you can have a no-fault eviction. In certain circumstances, there is very valid reasons why a landlord cannot rent that property out anymore. So say if they're taking it off the rental market, if a family member is moving in, or if they're selling it to someone who is going to move in themselves, that is a no-fault eviction. No one's at fault there. They can still evict that tenant. At the end of the day, it's still their property to do what they wish with. And lastly, if that, and we do have this problem in Vermont, a lot of the homes we live in are very, very old. 30% of the homes we live in were built before 1929. If that home needs substantial renovations, a landlord can evict a tenant for those reasons as well. So that is section B. In section C, we kind of lay out what this ordinance needs to include. So first of all, it needs to mitigate potential negative impacts on tenants and property owners, including but not limited to requirements of adequate notice and reasonable relocation expenses. This section really recognises that we have a very, very low vacancy rate right now. An eviction can mean homelessness. In fact, we've seen a rise in homelessness of 145% rise in homelessness in the last year. And a lot of part of this is to do with these evictions that are taking place right now. And so it means if there is a no-fault eviction, say a family member is moving in, or a landlord is about to put the property onto the property market, it would give you, the select board, the decision to be able to create a longer notice period for that and set relocation expenses, because it costs a lot of money to move house. It also provides a reasonable probationary period for initial occupancy, and this part's really important. This is a landlord-friendly, landlord-protective provision. It would allow you as a select board to set a probationary period before a just cause eviction rule would take effect for any new tenant. So say I, as a tenant, move into Joe Bloggs' house. Joe Bloggs will have a set period of time where he can evict me for no cause because I'm not the right fit. I'm not the right person he wants me be in his home. So you as a select board would be able to select how long that probationary period would be until I would be protected by just cause eviction measures. So that allows a landlord to really have that kind of, in the same way we have probationary periods in jobs, to have that period of time where they can go, actually this isn't going to work, and still get rid of me, even if I pay my rent on time, etc. And then lastly in this section, and this is very important, it would allow you to set, as a select board, what would be considered an unreasonable rent increase. And the reason why we need this in there is to stop a landlord from ballooning a rent up by 100%, 200%, an unreasonable amount, in order to get rid of a tenant because they know they can't pay, and then bring that rent back down again to what it was previously. It's basically, it closes a loophole. This is not intended for rent control. This is specifically intended to stop this loophole from basically being in place. Lastly, this ordinance shall define what is reasonable and adequate notice. As you'll notice in this charter change, there's a lot of flexibility here. What is reasonable, what is adequate notice will be defined by you as a select board when you write this ordinance. And it's important, this part, because housing law, or the housing market is going to change over the next year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. If you want to change a charter change because it doesn't adequately reflect your community anymore, you have to go back to the State House to get it changed. It's a 2-year-long process. We're all about to find out. It takes a long time and a lot of willpower. The way that we have written this, it builds this flexibility that allows you to change these ordinances, and how strong or how loose they are through things like what is an adequate notice, what is a reasonable rent increase, what is substantial renovations. And so it gives you that flexibility without having to go back to Montpellier. I do want to address one more thing that's not kind of laid out in the charter itself, and that's enforcement mechanism. Now, just cause eviction laws are not enforced by a municipality. The enforcement mechanism is the courts and the law. Presently, if an eviction is filed and is in court, instruct local law enforcement to vacate the property. This would not change. What would change is the reasons a landlord can evict. Right now, they can choose no cause when filing an eviction, but with a JCE municipal ordinance, they would have to give a specific agreed upon reason to evict. And it will be up to the courts to decide whether or not that claim meets the legal requirement. If the court disagrees with the filing, no eviction takes place. If the claim is proven correct, an eviction would proceed as it does now. Because cause laws would dramatically reduce the amount of evictions in Hartford. So in all likelihood, it would actually free up resources for law enforcement in the court. I hope I haven't gone on too long. I do apologise for the spotty internet, and I hope that has cleared up a few things for you. Happy to answer any questions.
Tom, is there any reason why this would need to be in the charter? Is there anything preventing the town from creating an ordinance on its own that would do something like this?
Yeah. So this is something we looked into when we first tried to pass it, because state law allows for no cause evictions. You have to put in a charter change. You can ask the state house that your municipal law is different to state law, which explicitly allows for no cause evictions. Because state law explicitly has no cause evictions in it, you need a charter change or a charter. Your charter needs to be different from the state law, effectively.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, the charter, it's kind of like the Constitution, the supremacy clause, right? Like, we can't change state law in our charter. I mean, I think that state law is supreme. And so it sounds like the method of doing it, I'm getting a no. State law is not, we could contradict state law with our charter? Okay.
Well, didn't we run into that issue with recent events with our contracts?
I don't know. That's interesting to hear that.
An example of that is Rattleboro Municipal recently passed a law that said non-resident voters can vote in local elections.
Yeah.
Now that's against the state law, but it's allowed in Rattleboro Municipal because they changed their charter specifically to
I
allow.
thought that the governor vetoed those on the basis that it would conflict with Vermont law.
They did when they went before the legislature, yes.
What's that?
When it went before the governor and the legislature, the governor vetoed it,
Yeah.
yes.
And it was overridden by a majority,
Yeah.
the supermajority of the legislature.
Okay, well, that's a question I will have.
But it has to go through the, yeah,
Lynn,
it
do
has
you
to go
have
through the
a
House.
comment?
My comment is, if this charter cannot supersede state law, this select board cannot exist. State law says 3 or 5 select board members. We have 7 because it's in our charter, which overrides state law.
Does it override, or does the state allow the town to set its own number? Like it delegates that portion in the charter? I guess that's my question.
No, it says,
Because-
state law says 3 or 5.
Okay, well, I will definitely ask to learn more about that, because that seems to, I don't know, that just isn't something that is
Well-
sitting well with me, I guess, is the
Why
way to put it.
else would you have a charter if you wanted to?
I think you would,
Hartford existed for years and years and years without a charter, going
Yeah.
on the green books.
yeah, and look, I don't want to get into necessarily an argument about this, but I do think that is something to get clarity on that would be important for the select board, because it's just, it just seems counter to what I would expect.
And just when you're ready, FX has his hand up. I don't know if you'd like to hear from him next.
Well, are there questions for Tom before we go anywhere else?
I have a handful of questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Tom, thank you for this presentation. I'm looking forward to the PowerPoint so I can flip through that. Trying to find. Okay, so I had Mike's question because I guess that's sort of contrary to my intuitive understanding of the way the law flows, but maybe that is something that we look at again. Tom, when you're talking about eviction, the non-renewal of a lease at the end of term, that's classified in your definition of an eviction, is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay. And then in this, so my understanding from your early presentation, and then I know you and I emailed, so I looked through those materials as well. My understanding is that the underlying fundamental problem this is trying to solve is a shortage of housing that is resultant in pricing pressure and a higher rate of eviction, especially at the lower socioeconomic classes across Vermont. Is that correct?
Somewhat. I mean, I've got to really push in that this is not the silver bullet that is going to solve the housing crisis. We still don't have enough houses. There is far too many vacant, unavailable properties out there that we need to deal with in other ways. What this really fundamentally will do is just stop people getting evicted that have done nothing wrong. They pay their rent on time, they've looked after their property. So that's what this is specifically intended to do.
So it's a renter protection measure, basically, but you're acknowledging that it's not the silver bullet to solving the housing crisis. That makes sense to me, too. Okay, and then section C, 17C2, provide for a reasonable probationary period after initial 4 occupancy. That should be 4 months? Or am I looking at the wrong draft? Or 4?
No, sorry, we didn't set the amount of probationary period within the charter change itself, because we wanted the city council or the select board to be able to set that themselves based on what your community would be best suited towards.
It looks like the number 4 might have been left in there by accident or somehow.
Okay.
That 4 comes from the fact it's the 4th line of the charter. That was left in the facts. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So it would just allow for a probationary period. I guess when I think through that, I wonder if, so that would be the select board writing into the ordinance that there would be a probationary period, reasonable, defined by the select board, during which that probationary period, a landlord could say, hey, this is not going to work out for me with this tenant, so I'm going to evict this tenant under no cause eviction.
Correct.
So right now, in my understanding of current law is that no cause eviction would not be permissible in violation of a standing lease. Is that correct?
So could you just repeat the question?
So if a lessor is renting an apartment, that lease is going to protect that renter from being kicked out in the middle of a probationary period. Is that correct? Like the exceptions would be if they violate the lease or there's non-payment, which would be a violation of lease. Is that?
So right now you can in fact evict for no cause in the middle of a lease. Now it takes 60 days notice to do so, then it's got to go through the courts. It doesn't happen that commonly because it's going to take about an 8-month process to formally evict someone, but it is something that you are allowed to do. And in fact, if you've got a multi-year lease, which some people do have, you can still evict a person for no cause in the middle of a lease.
Cool. If you, it would be super helpful to have statutory references to some of those things, because I didn't actually know that, so that would be great to be able to.
I can get you that.
Where?
I'll show you where they are.
Okay, good. Okay. I always thought it was on here and I missed it. Okay, great. And then the select board would define reasonable and adequate as terms. Okay, so my 2 other questions I have remaining are, what would stop a landlord if we were to pass this clause in the charter, and then the select board would pass a just cause eviction ordinance? What would stop a landlord from discriminating more stringently against tenants before they rented?
There's nothing stopping them now. So nothing really, in the same way that, you may have seen the 7 Days article, or the VT Digger article the other day about landlords charging application fees. Now that's an illegal practice in Vermont, and in fact in that article, many of these property managers were told that it was illegal on the basis of this article, and they continue doing it. There is landlords flagrantly disobeying the law right now in Vermont. There's nothing to stop landlords from discriminating against folks now. There would be nothing really to stop landlords from discriminating against potential tenants with the just cause eviction law. What it does do is, once you are a tenant, it will stop landlords from being able to evict people for discriminatory reasons, because they need a specific reason to be able to evict.
Okay, so I did read that 7 Days article, and that does seem unlawful and wrong, just morally wrong that they are persisting with that. I guess my concern, and this kind of blends into my next question, is my concern is if you reduce the security that a landlord would have to manage the property in the way that they see fit, which would include no cause eviction. I do see your point about the protection here. Looking from the perspective of a landlord, if we say, well, we're going to eliminate some of these tools for you to manage your property within these ways, do we create an adverse incentive to heighten the discrimination or heighten some of those screening protocols, whether it's lawful or unlawful, so that, to hedge their downside later? And then that's a sort of a rhetorical question, I guess. And then the real question following out of that is, what alternate solutions have you, your organization, or other thinkers in this field come up with that we might also consider to sort of approach this?
Yeah, so to kind of just address the first part, with the market the way it is right now, we've got a 2.4% vacancy rate across the state. I don't know what it is specifically in Hartford. It's very difficult to get that kind of data. We don't have a rental registry, so it's kind of like the Wild West out there. We don't know what we don't know. It's very difficult to find out. What we do know is rental increases have happened across the board. What we do know is house prices have ballooned in the last 2 years. It's very difficult to get onto the housing ladder. We know that there is very few houses out there, very few options for renters if they are looking to move at all. And so, however discriminatory a landlord is likely to be, it's not going to be any more discriminatory than it can be right now. They can be as discriminatory as they like because there is so much demand and very, very, very little supply. To get to your second point, could you just remind me what that second point was? Sorry about that.
Yeah. Well, I know you said this is not intended to be a silver bullet, and I get that this is a complex systemic issue. But just what are other alternate solutions that may have come up in conversations? Or you're obviously much more plugged into this field than I am, and so just sort of relying on you as an expert here. What are alternate solutions that we might consider as a select board, as a community, to protect renters? And why would those maybe not be why are those not as good as this one, or why is this the best one, or what are if you can sort of talk us through the field outside of this clause itself, just to give us some context.
Sorry, you did break up a little bit towards the end there, but I think I heard most of it. In terms of other solutions that we have, we're fairly limited. It's the way that housing market is at the moment. As I said, it's very Wild West. There's no kind of regulation. That's why there is plenty of property companies out there right now that are more than happy to continue to charge for application fees, knowing full well there's going to be any mechanism to stop them from doing so. On a municipal level, there is not much you can do pushing some sort of charter change. It just cause eviction, be it rent control, would be potentially another one. The regulation of Airbnbs in order to bring down the amount of vacant second homes there are right now, which probably would increase the amount of housing stock you have. Reform Act D, so if you rip up the zoning regulations, that is another possibility. For about 5 years, start ripping up your zone. In terms of fair and short-term solutions to what is an epidemic. Sorry, I broke up again, didn't I?
Tell them to kill this
I'm
video.
going to go off camera and hopefully that will help a little bit.
Okay.
Bandwidth.
So there is things like rent control. There is things like a reform of zoning regulations. There is things like regulating Airbnbs. But all of these solutions require a charter change, and some of these solutions you won't see them pay off dividends for a long time. Things like zoning regulation, you're not going to see that pay off for 5-10 years. You still need to build the property. Just cause eviction is being assessed as something you can do fairly immediately, that it's going to have fairly immediate results, that it's not going to cost any money for a municipality.
Okay, so I guess my follow-up to that is, why not approach this charter change with a broader scope to be more flexible and allow the select board more latitude to explore these? For me, in some ways, looking at this, it feels very, very specific. I know that there is some flexibility here in terms of what terms are defined and so forth, but it feels pretty prescriptive and specific. So why take this approach versus carving out more latitude for this select board or future select boards to basically work within that to explore all the like a blend of these options or all the
Yeah,
above?
that's a really great question. And I think I saw this firsthand when trying to get this through the State House with the Burlington Charter change. Now, the Burlington Charter change is exactly the same language as the one proposed for Hartford. And giving Burlington that amount of power and that amount of flexibility was balked at, was treated with I don't know, with quite a lot of fear by the State House. I don't mean to be disparaging about the State House. We've got a lot of friends in there, a lot of friends with senators, a lot of friends with representatives, but they don't give out power to municipalities very easily. And so this is about the level that the State House will allow any municipality to have power over their own housing market. And that's when it was written by Erhard Manke, who has a lot of experience in the State House, and it was written by Sarah Carpenter, who again has a lot of experience in housing in the State House. This was considered about as far as you can go as a municipality that's not just going to get ignored or pushed back to a municipality with a disapproval.
So this is sort of a calibrated guess that this is the greatest carve out that through charter change our select board would be able to have any influence within the housing market beyond what is extant within our powers, our given powers.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, I think that's all my questions. Thank you,
So,
Tom.
Tom, I just had a couple of follow-ups. So it seems like the main thing maybe this does is, so what we're basically doing is we're saying that, are you basically saying that like the expiration of a lease term, is like, yeah, that's not like a proper reason for getting rid of someone? So if I'm renting to you, we come to the end of the lease term, I decide to rent to someone else, you get the right of first refusal, essentially.
Correct. If I have paid my rental time, if I've looked after the property, and you're going to continue renting out that domicile, then I get the right of first refusal for a new lease. Now, it's important to note that you can change that lease. If I had dogs, for instance, and you did not like those dogs because they bark at you when you come round, you can put into that lease, no dogs. And then if I refuse to sign it, because naturally I don't want to get rid of my dogs, I can get evicted still.
So I could change the lease term, but otherwise, if I didn't change the lease term, I would have to offer you a lease. I wouldn't have to if I was retiring that unit from like the rental market entirely. But otherwise, I would have to basically be like, here you go, you get the right of first refusal.
Correct, but again,
Okay.
you can change that lease. So
Yep.
if you change the lease, I could be like, I don't want to re-sign because you've increased the rent, or I'm not allowed dogs anymore.
Yeah.
And if that was the case, then I would have to leave still.
Okay. And then just the one other thing I wanted to mention, it talks about limiting unreasonable rent increases. And, I just wonder, I don't think anyone would call the housing market after COVID, during COVID, anything like reasonable, So it's the question of the market. What does the market bear? And I imagine the market could be considered unreasonable on its own, just when you have massive price increases. So I do wonder whether that, I don't know. I just wonder about that one. Lanny?
Yeah, go ahead.
Or go ahead, Tom, and then to
I
Lanny.
was going to say, that's been set different ways in different municipalities. Mostly it's a consumer price index plus a certain percentage.
Okay.
That would be down to the select board setting what that would be. So if you want it to be CPI plus 20%, then it's CPI plus 20%. If you want it to be CPI plus 100%, it's CPI plus 100%. It's up to you to decide what a reasonable is. Most places go anywhere between 5 and 12. I think the best one I've seen is it's CPI plus 5 or 10%, whichever is lower. That's my favourite, but, you know, I'm a tenant advocate, so obviously.
Yep. Sure. All right, Lanny?
Now, one of the things you mentioned is that you stated if a tenant looks after the property correctly, there should be no cause for eviction. I guess I'm hung on that one a little bit because my definition of what may be looking after the property correctly and your definition of what may be looking after the property correctly may be worlds apart. I understand that there's going to be bumps and scrapes as they go along the way, but if you constantly have to go in and, you know, fix little things that are $5, $10, you know, dollar items along the way, is that acceptable? Or is it acceptable if not acceptable if they break, you know, sinks or lavatories? Or I guess what is it that defines taking care of the property, the tenant taking care of the property correctly? That to me is a hang up. And then the other thing I guess that I do have a hang up with as well is the fact that we as a select board, I don't think are in any way, shape or form under the, have the ability to judge what a rental increase should be, regardless of whether it's CPI plus 4 or what. If a landlord in the cause of someone's property rental, if they have to make changes to the property and they improve the property, such as like with better fixtures or with better doors or better windows when a door gets broken, that's going to increase the value of that property. And the landlord should be able to compensate for that with increased rent the next time that comes around. So it bothers me that we're going to be the ones to judge what that rent should not be increased by. And in the tenant's eyes, they're just saying that, well, they had to replace it anyways, okay? But the landlord's saying, okay, yes, I had to replace it, but I didn't have to replace it. I could have either replaced it in kind, or I could have made my property that much more valuable by putting an Armstrong 3-pane window in there. And so I have some problems with that. And I as you stated, this was on a 5-2 vote, and I voted against it on the charter committee. I personally feel that the select board should not be in the business of getting into the rental housing market. This is going to open up a set of doors for us or other communities, I think, that are into this, where we're going to have a rental housing department eventually in the town of Hartford if we do this. And I'm a firm believer that there should be less government control on things. There is not enough protection, in my opinion, for the landlord himself. The tenant doesn't have to tell the tenant doesn't have to tell the landlord that they're going to seek other housing, so that landlord can't count on that tenant being there. There's not enough protections in here, I think. It's all one-sided on the tenant side of this thing.
Do you have a question, or may I ask a question built off of that?
So, in answer to maybe the first question, let's get to the second question, because I can't quite remember the first question here. The second question is who you to decide how much your rent increases. I want to be very explicit here. The portion of the charter change that talks about a reasonable rent increase is specifically to stop a landlord from using a rent increase as a de facto eviction. What we're trying to do with this charter change here with our ordinance is to lay out reasons why a landlord can get rid of a tenant. If a landlord can't prove that tenant has broken those reasons, then what we're trying to do here is to stop them from increasing the rent by 100%, 200%, 300%. What you decide is reasonable is there to stop a landlord from using a rent increase as a de facto eviction and then bringing the rents back down again for the next tenant. In terms of I can't quite remember what the first question was, unfortunately.
May I ask a question?
Well, wait, the first question was relating to the care of the property.
Yeah, care of property. If someone is not, taking the quality care of the property, who defines what quality care of property is? I mean, do I define that? If there's a multitude of reasons why I, as a landlord, I feel that I would not want to rent to somebody again. If the person is extremely messy person and they leave their garbage all over the place in the house, quite frankly, if they don't take care of themselves and it smells terrible all the time, I'm not taking their apartment that way, but that is not inflicting bodily damage upon the apartment, but it's still causing a headache for the tenant, for the landlord to have to deal with if that tenant should leave. And I don't believe that you can write every single situation into a clause for occupancy of a contract. I don't think there's any way that you can write every single thing of what if into a rental agreement. And there has to be some sort of an avenue for a tenant to say, this is, for a landlord to say, this is enough, I've given you warnings about this, verbal warnings, but it's too much, and now we have to part company.
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. It's entirely up to you what you put into a rental agreement. If bodily odor is something that is objectionable to you, then you can write that into your rental agreement. If that's something that you discover after you've rented to someone, and then the next time the lease is up, you can write that into the rental agreement.
My point is, you can never write in every single scenario but that's just an oddball thing, but there's no way you can write in every single scenario that you as a landlord may come across with a tenant. And there has to be that availability to be able to evict that tenant without having to change a basic rental clause for all your tenants within the building. I don't think you should have to have a separate rental agreement for every single tenant within the building. That is putting an undue amount of work on a landlord to go to lawyers to get rental agreements drawn up.
Yeah, and I mean, yep, go ahead.
I think what serves that purpose would be the probationary period. Like, that would be the period in which, if there's something that the landlord found to be undesirable, then if that probation period is the first year of a lease, or the 1 year or something like that, then that is the probation period that the landlord can still end the lease for no cause.
So I'd also note that, under the landlord-tenant laws, I mean, we're not in a vacuum here. Under the landlord-tenant laws, it says the tenant shall not deliberately or negligently destroy, deface, damage, remove any part of the premises, mechanical systems, or furnishings, and a landlord can take them to court to recover costs, and also its grounds for termination. So you don't have to spell everything out, because that's what the courts do, It's like the courts look at all the situations individually, so you don't have to have, like, every possible, every possibility of how someone could damage a property to make it enforceable. It's sort of broadly written, and then the landlord can enforce it in the court.
So what is the need then, I might ask, Mr. Chairman, of having a just cause eviction if the state of Vermont has these provisions?
Well, I think what would be different is it would prevent expiration of a lease term. It would offer the tenant the right of first refusal. I don't know that I agree with that, but what it seems basically like is that if you're renting with someone and you continue to rent your property, when the term expires, you have to offer them the opportunity to rent it again.
So can I, as a landlord, say to somebody, no, you can't leave because I don't want to go out and look for a different tenant?
No.
Exactly.
They can go and do their own thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's something to think about. Kim?
I could respond to that or not. But,
Okay. Are there other questions for Tom while we have him here? Rocket?
Mr. Chair, Tom, do you have, I guess I'm thinking through what Lanny's saying in this back and forth here, and thinking with, you're saying that a lot of these things could be solved by from a landlord perspective by simply writing these into the lease. I'm wondering, some contracts are like 100 pages long, and I think you might run into cases where tenants sign stuff because they're desperate, they need the housing and so forth. People sign things all the time, similar as we do privacy policies for Instagram or TikTok or something like that, without actually reading them. So my concern is that you create this possibility for exploitation in that way, or an adverse incentive for people to exploit that by overwriting things into the leases, to say, oh, well, you're in violation of the lease here because the lease says that you would park your car this many inches from the garage, or absurd criteria like that would be difficult for us to write out in terms of what is reasonable and what's not, prevent. And then I'm wondering too, if this creates downstream, because I see the benefits to, especially to a renter, to me are pretty obvious, and they seem great from the renter perspective. I'm wondering if this could downstream create a pile up of litigation through the court system around some of these nuances. So if you've thought through maybe what are the possible downsides of this, and then have you guys spoken to any real estate lawyers or people who are bar certified, basically, to give us a perspective on what we're looking at?
Yeah, so in terms of the first question, what if people start kind of exploiting the fact that some of these leases will end up being 100 pages and saying some absurd things? That already happens. Because we do have no cause eviction, there are plenty of landlords out there that are, and unfortunately this mostly happens in the new American and immigrant community, but there's a lot of landlords out there that are quite discriminatory and use no cause as a cudgel over the heads of immigrant families to say that they can't cut certain things, or they have to put their bins out in a certain place or in a certain way, and if they don't do that, then they will be evicted. I know one family right now whose father is suicidal because of basically the reason why they had to flee their homeland. He's got severe PTSD, and so the landlord only interacts with this 15-year-old son, and his son gets demands on a daily basis to do certain things, and if he doesn't do those certain things, the landlord is threatening eviction. So I'm saying that this already happens. In terms of an increase of litigation...
Wait. So Tom, can we stick with that for a second? So how does this JCE prevent it from happening? That's my point, is like,
Most landlords are reasonable people. Most landlords are there to make money from renting out their homes. And most landlords, because there'll be a law in place saying that you need these reasons to evict someone, they'll go, okay, I will stick to this kind of framework, and they're not going to write 100-page leases because they're not unreasonable people. Obviously, you may get the odd landlord or two that does write an unreasonable lease, but I would say it's probably in the minority. So it doesn't prevent landlords from writing unreasonable leases, but what it does do is it means you don't have that knee-jerk outlet to be able to get rid of a tenant for a very spurious or small reason. You need something substantive in order to be able to evict someone. And although most landlords are reasonable, good people, with an easy out to be able to evict someone, if someone does kind of annoy you, or you do get called in to fix the heating 3 times in the winter, or they do complain a little about the black mold and they want it to be repainted, they can't just evict them for that reason. And that easy out, unfortunately, because we're humans, we like taking the easy option, is being used more and more. And it's affecting a lot of tenants. And it just takes away that easy out. No, it's not going to fix all landlord-tenant relations, but it's going to fix a lot.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question was about pipeline of litigation and / if you've had legal experts weigh in on this.
Yeah, so I wrote this not only with Hard and Sarah Carpenter. The groups that came together initially to push this were CBOEO and Legal Aid. Legal Aid being the biggest ones. Legal Aid over the pandemic have seen this huge spike of no-cause evictions. They're the ones that have gathered the data for no-cause evictions, and they are completely and utterly inundated with eviction cases, specifically no-cause eviction cases. It's basically all they're doing at the moment. CBOEO has a tenant eviction tenant hotline, and they have run through the managers of that hotline about 1 every 3 months because it is such a thankless job. There's so many people calling in about things that they can't do. right now the courts are gummed up with so many people getting evicted. So yeah, we've spoken to them at length extensively, and they are of the opinion, based on how other states have implemented this, that if we were to put in a just cause eviction measure statewide or on a municipal basis, it would actually reduce the amount of work that they have to do, because they would not be going to court all the time to try and fight eviction cases that they know they're going to lose by default.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Mary?
Yeah, I just have one question, and I think I know the answer, but I just want to check with you, Tom. What happens, and I'm assuming nothing happens, if a landlord decides that they want to do some renovations because they actually want a higher market for their tenants? So they want someone who's going to pay more. So it's not necessarily a renovation that has to be done, but that way they can ask for top dollar. And I'm assuming that there's nothing you can do, but I just wanted to check with you.
Yeah, so landlords can still do renovations. They can actually even evict for no cause or for no fault if the place needs like substantial renovations, if the tenant would need to leave because of that renovation that needs to take place. If it is just I don't want to say a vanity renovation, but like a frivolous renovation in order to make it more expensive. I don't think they would be able to evict, but they would still be able to increase the rent if you put, as a select board, into the reasonable rent increase. If you put 20 grand into making a building better, then you can increase your rent by this much. You could create some kind of rubric there in terms of what would constitute a reasonable rent increase, and that could include substantial renovations. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Lanny?
And my concern about that exact situation is what Mary's addressed, is that many times in order to do upgrades to a property, you have to have the people out of the property. And such as if you're replacing a heating system or going to replace carpeting, or, well, carpeting you can get away with somebody there, but if you're going to do a system upgrade, or if you're going to be completely doing more insulation in the walls, many times you have to have the tenants out of the property. So that would be the time for the person, I mean, between when a contract is up and before they renew it with somebody else, would be the normal time period in which a tenant goes in and makes all these adjustments and then increases the rent accordingly. But what you're saying is that this person won't be able to, the landlord won't be able to do that because the tenant, this won't allow them to do that because the tenant has the right to say, unless you raise the contract and the rates of the contract.
No, Lane, that's exempted in
Well-
17B3, right?
Well, the thing is though, that what is, it seems like it's preventing someone from upgrading their property by putting more insulation in the walls or doing a complete retrofit just because they want to, not because they have to, but because they want to reach a higher market out there. That's the thing I guess I'm not quite sure I understand. You don't have to increase anything. You can get away with people living in what they're living in, but yet, I mean, you want to improve the property to get, improve your own property for your value-wise and to get better tenants in there. And that seems like me that it's going to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, so as I believe Selectboardman Rocket mentioned, in B subsection 3, if there does need to be substantial renovation for good occupancy, you can no fault evict a tenant. It just requires that the landlord gives adequate notice and reasonable relocation expenses.
That's the part though. Need versus, the need for it versus just plain old wanting to improve your property. I don't need to improve this property. I can let somebody live with a system that works overtime. Or I can put a brand new heating system in and cut the cost to this, my future tenants by, say 5% down the road. But I don't need to do that. But in order to do that, I have to have the whole property vacated so I can put in this whole new heating system. That, to me, is the rub here.
You can, I mean, as a landlord, if you want to upgrade your heating system, I believe you would be able to create a very easy argument that that is in fact a need rather than a want. And barring changing a heating system, I can't think of really very many other things that would preclude occupancy. I believe maybe shoring up the foundations, which is very much a need, or removing the roof, which I would say is very much a need as well. But things like I work on weatherization as well in my housing capacity. We just got a grant to create a policy around tenant weatherization. So I work a lot with folks that do that weatherization, do that heat system, heat pump work. It's very, very rare that this work precludes occupancy. But most of the time, 99 times out of 100, this work can be done with tenants still in the building, or at the very least, tenants only have to leave for a short period of time.
Kim, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a comment and a question, and the comment is relating to how fortunate we are currently in the town of Hartford to have mostly developers who live in the region, who we know and we see them in the co-op, and but I do feel maybe just anecdotally, but also from these articles, that it is increasing the number of more corporate and franchise rental property management companies are coming into the region and buying up rental properties. And so I think while I feel like we are currently in a place in this particular municipality where tenants are genuinely protected and cared for, I think something like this to me is a preparing for the future and to some extent the present also. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we do have some very thoughtful property developers here in the town of Hartford. And then the other thing I wanted to ask is just in terms of process, I know that charter amendments like this have gone before the legislation and passed but then vetoed by the governor. Same with the rental registry, which I'm in strong favor of. Is your sense, is what you're suggesting, that if this goes to the legislature, gets to the governor and is vetoed, that there's substantial support in the legislature to override a veto at this point?
Yes, we had a great election day in November. We were very much preparing this campaign, and just to be very honest with you all, we are trying to pass this in Hartford, we're trying to pass this in Brattleboro, in Winooski, and in Essex. In fact, Essex are doing it very similar to the way you are. In Brattleboro and in Winooski, we're actually gathering signatures. On top of this municipality campaign, we're also pushing something called a Housing for All campaign, which is launching in January, and that actually includes statewide just cause eviction, as well as a rental registry redux. The reason why we are confident to push all of this in the next 2 years is because we had a fantastic November where we ended up getting a supermajority. And we've talked with the Democratic leadership in the House and the Senate. We have currently got co-sponsors for the rental registry. Alison Clarkson, I believe, is going to be bringing it back up again. Keisha Ram is really backing this policy platform as well. And then we've got co-sponsors on the House side for statewide just cause eviction. So we have everything basically ready to go through the State House, and part of that push is showing that multiple municipalities want these kind of protections, and so we are very sure that at the very least, if these charter changes get to the State House, it will be vetoed, but we will definitely get that veto override vote. But we have so much more leeway this time. We had 99 votes last year. This year, I believe we got 109, I think, in the House and 22 in the Senate.
can I follow up with one more? And so, also process, and so if the charter with this proposed amendment goes before our Hartford voters in March, and if they do not approve it, what's that, I guess that wouldn't, is that maybe not a question for you, Tom? That might
That
be.
kills the whole charter.
To kill the whole, that kills the provision.
No, it kills the charter.
It
The
would-
whole
If it's
thing?
included, if it's
No,
included.
it made
within
if you
the charter.
busted out that one.
We have to bust, yeah, we have to separate it.
Okay, so on the ballot, there can be an option to
Yes.
include this
That-
amendment or not?
That would be my suggestion, is to separate this from the charter. That way the charter does not get held up by the voters of Hartford or the voters within Montpelier, so that we could still
Okay,
get the
and-
charter
And you
through.
cleared that with
Yes.
whatever legal, okay, great.
Yes, that could be separated. And it would be the suggestion to move forward with this if we want to.
Yeah, I would definitely support that.
Lanny, can I just clarify that? When you're saying it can be put on the ballot as a separate amendment to the charter?
Yes.
Or are you saying as a separate ordinance?
Separate amendment to the charter.
Okay, so it's like there'd be two versions
Right.
of the charter?
To include this in the, within the charter, or vote on this aspect of the charter.
And that sometimes makes sense for issues that are, I mean, this is clearly a pretty charged issue, I think.
Correct.
Passionate one.
Okay, and I think most of my other questions
Are
were
we through
answered.
with, are we through with Tom?
Well, I do want to just clarify one more thing, because we did get some questions by email from members of the community that I think have been answered, and if they haven't, then they could ask again. But those things relating to the ambiguity of the language in the charter is basically a general framework for what would be developed as an ordinance, or what could be, it's not a mandate to, but that this would not go into effect. This just allows us the opportunity to establish a town ordinance that would then bring all the specifics and define things like adequate notice and those kind of things that were
Yeah.
just, I think they were super reasonable questions, but it is not that the specifics would be in our charter, but the specifics would be in the ordinance that we would be able to create if the charter is passed.
Yeah, it seems like this would enable us to do a thing, and then when you get to the questions about like what's a unreasonable rent increase and what's an adequate notice, that's where we would draft it essentially.
Yeah,
Um,
and there's still
yeah.
one.
I do have more for the board discussion.
She thinks there's one more thing.
Well, there's just been a hand up from FX from the beginning.
I know, let's just get all our questions done, sorry it's taking so long, and then FX can comment on, I'm sure he'll have some answers for us or thoughts for us. Yep, Rocket?
Yeah, Tom, going back to the idea of just giving select board broader powers, is there no reason why couldn't this whole segment, these 4 A, B, C, D, just be reduced down to basically just granting the select board a regulating rental housing ordinance protection? Like, could we just do something like that?
Because, and again, I'm afraid it's just the way the State House works, but that would be seen as too broad by the State House. The fact, it's, I don't mean to teach you this, I'm sure a lot of you already know, but yeah, the reason why it's so specifically laid out is to be did it in a more broader way. They will start in the State House and GovOps will start imagining all these hypotheticals and what that would possibly mean, and thinking of doomsday scenarios of what that would then include. So it's got to be a certain amount of specific, but it's also going to be a certain amount of flexible, which is why we kind of came up with what we came up with.
So I guess my question on that is when it goes to how much leeway does the GovOps committee take in like rewriting the provisions of a charter? I mean, are they just looking at things that are either like an obvious error or something that would not be lawful or constitutional, or are they going in and changing this language when they're in there to add more specifics or things like that? I mean, at some point, are we losing control of sort of the ultimate intent of this particular provision?
They have every right to change this in entirety. They can pass something completely different to the intent of what you decided it to be.
Yeah.
For Burlington, they decided what the probationary period was. They also decided on what the what adequate notice would be. We fought hard, really hard, to stop them going further than that, and it was constant vigilance at each GovOps meeting, in both the House and the Senate, to make sure they didn't change it any further.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. Any more questions for Tom? Tom, thank you so much.
Callie, do you have any questions for Tom?
I'm good, thank you, and thanks.
Oh, hey, Ally. Didn't realize Ally had joined. Tom, thank you so much for providing all this information and
Thank you.
answering all of our questions. It's much appreciated.
No worries, and I am available via my email. My phone is in my email signature, and I have sent you all the slideshow. So if anyone does need me, I am available to the 16th of this month, and then I am off to England for a few weeks.
Fantastic.
Sounds like
I'm
home.
available for then.
All right, well, thank you very much, Tom. Take care. Okay, do we have FX on? You may want to comment on this.
FX, go ahead when you're ready.
Yes, hi.
Hi, FX.
All right, thanks. So, just a couple of things. If you go and you pull up Vermont state law, at some point you come to a chapter that has the charters in it. So, our charter will be Vermont state law. It already is Vermont state law. So, that, it's not that the charter is somehow above state law or below state law. The charter is state law. The reason why, but it's state law that only applies in the town of Hartford. So that's why the state legislature is probably not going to allow a town or city in the state to have a charter that permits things that the state is not interested in having in the state anywhere. Like if the Hartford charter said the town of Hartford can have gambling casinos, the state legislature, and we voted to pass it, the state legislature might say, everything else about your charter is fine, but we're striking that out. We're not gonna put that, we're not putting that into state law. So, yeah, the charter is not the constitution of our town. It's just that our town needs to have some variations on state law in order to most effectively perform its work. That's why charters are allowed. So there's that. The other technical thing I wanted to say is that, first of all, I had never, in the past 4 charter commissions, that interpretation of our charter and state law has never come up, that so-called strict reading. It's always been that the committee has presented recommendations to the school board and select board, and then they have voted what to put on the warrant.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we understood the intent to be. We've just gotten this brought up to us by municipal attorneys in the Vermont League of City and Towns. So we know what the intent is. If there's a chance in this charter to make sure that we can amend that so we don't have this, this alternative reading out there, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, well, Mike, that's something that I'll go to work on if you could connect me with the interpretation that you got. Because, Paul Giuliani was really the main guy in Vermont when it came to municipal law, and he just passed away a couple of months ago. And he was always the town of Hartford's municipal attorney for municipal law matters. And same for VLCT. Even the Secretary of State would go to Paul. So Paul was, the guy. And, and he never cautioned us, along these lines at all. So I'll just leave it at that. I do want to say, though, that my concept of what will happen and now I'm speaking as an individual, not as a member of the committee, I want to be clear about that. But my concept about what will happen is that the school board and the select board will agree to put forward a revised charter for approval by the town, and that there will be one or more things that are pulled out to be voted on separately, so that the main question will be, shall the town of Hartford revise its charter, in conformance with the revised version dated whatever that is available, that's available on the website and is available here at the polling place, yes or no? And then there'll be a question that says, shall the following provisions be added to the revised charter if the revised charter is approved? And then there'll be the just cause eviction language. And so that's how you can take everything that is not controversial or everything that is kind of pro forma and separate from those things where you would only want to pass it knowing that the people of the town had voted by a majority to support it going into the charter. So that's all I have to say right now. I'll be happy to answer other questions later, and I'll be happy to answer any questions about what I've just said.
Thank you, FX. All right. Paul?
So with other members of the committee here, can we get a confirmation that they will say that they are withdrawing the draft so we can go forward? I understand what FX is saying as far as making the adjustment for the next review, but for our purposes here, I think it would be very helpful at this point to state that they are okay, that the members of the committee are okay with withdrawing the draft, so it's not the final draft. So we can go through the process of the select board review, of the school board review, of having meetings such as this for public input without us having, being forced, based on the advice we've gotten this year, to get it on the 2023 ballot.
I mean, I think that would be helpful. I mean, I know that this hasn't been the way it was in the past, and this hasn't been a concern before, but we have a differing interpretation that came up, and if you look at the federal courts, you can see how interpretations change pretty easily, fairly quickly, and so I don't want us to get hung up on that. So I think that would be helpful if we could get an indication from the committee that they are fine leaving this with us for revisions. And Lynn?
Lynn Boha, co-chair of the Charter Commission. When the commission as a whole talked about the steps, we said, okay, we're gonna, we brought it to you a couple months ago and incorporated your feedback, and then we had a final draft that we chose to pass, and then it went off to the lawyer, and then we made some more revisions after the lawyer, and this is our final draft to you, with the understanding that both of the two boards can change it. You guys decide what language goes on the ballot. We don't make that decision.
Okay.
That's my understanding of our understanding.
Yep, thank you. I think that just gives us some reassurance.
So you don't need to formally,
Okay, well, select board members, are there other areas of the charter that are being proposed to be changed that you'd like some clarity on or like to point out, just so that we can?
Are we going to address what the town clerk had for other areas?
Well, we can, I think. I mean, it might be helpful if.
So Lanny, this was one of the reasons it came up that we were hopeful that we didn't have to rush forward on this. We shared with staff the documents that FX provided, and staff definitely wanted to comment, but they felt that the timeline didn't give them enough time. And in speaking with the town clerk as well, who has several concerns, we'd rather let staff meet as a group and give us an opportunity to talk back and forth a little bit about concerns, and then I think we could bring them to you in a more concise and thoughtful manner.
I think that's fine. Yeah, I mean, be an opportunity, we'd like to certainly get all of their, concerns or recommendations or changes in language to us, just so we have it all there, and that'll sort of be our next thing and come to us. And certainly, we'll invite members of the committee to come to address those concerns that are brought up. Mary?
Mr. Chairman, if, I've already read this like 3 times,
Yeah.
and each time I read it, I come up with something else that I want to think about.
Yep.
If I have some issues with some of these things, who do I address? Do I send it to Lynn and FX, or do I address it to our board, or?
This time it's, oh, I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
Well, go ahead. I mean,
At this
if you
time,
have
yeah.
a thought, maybe.
At this time, it's
Sure.
completely on the board to make changes as we see fit.
Okay.
So it's to be addressed, you can address it at the board level. And the
Okay.
board can choose to accept or not accept what's presented to it by the charter committee.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So
think
we
Mary
have the
also-
ability to make the changes.
But Mary, it sounds like you are wondering if you have questions about what a
Right.
particular provision means, where can she get information on that?
Well, I mean, there is one here that I actually had been looking at, and there is comment from FX, but it's not the point, his comment was not the point that I was
What-
making.
What is it? We can discuss
Well,
it.
it's,
Yeah, we can ask.
um,
We can answer it too. I mean, you can make it.
and I hope you're not offended by what I'm going to say, and I know this is not the meat of the charter, but someone who taught writing for 30-some years, I am saying, I'll be honest with you, the format of the previous charter makes more sense. I cannot find things now. I'm used to a topic, then a subtopic, and then it goes on, the indents, because then I can locate, and if we want people to be able to locate some of the topics that the charter addresses, it's easier, like I can say, I know it's a duty of elected officers or appointed officers, so I look for that. The way this goes right straight down, it just has my eyes going crazy.
I cannot tell you how many times I've been through that. And I read it, a couple times a week. And no, that isn't, yeah.
So I can't even tell you where this is, because it's the one where it's about meetings, dates, times, votes, ballots. And then there's a warrant information night, AKA info night meeting. It just seems like a lot of these things say may, but then it becomes so specifically detailed, and may, to me, says, you don't have to do this. But it's so specific that I felt, when I was reading it, wow, they want us, even though it says may, to do all of these things. And so I found myself getting a little panicky. And it's not that I don't want to help, but it's just, that was one of my comments. I said, why is this stated as a may? Because is this too much? Why is this in the charter if it's a may? And I'm just using the word may instead of shall and will, and it's a new section. And I'm sure it's to benefit the people of the town, but I guess I just wondered if we say we may do this, why is it in the charter? I always think that the charter is something that it tells us what we're supposed to be doing, and maybe I'm totally wrong on that. It's not just a guide.
Lynn Bohai again. You're right about may and shall, as Michael knows. And I think if you're reading the voting day section, the town meeting section,
Yeah.
the FX's hand is about to pop up, I guarantee you.
Yeah, he says, making clear that this first event of the town meeting cycle should not be treated as an option by the select board or school board. So it sounds like his comment sounds more serious and more specific than addressing this may happen and this may. So I got confused.
In former charters, there was stuff that was laid out as shalls. The current town and school meeting committee felt a little more restricted by that. And they worked very closely with FX about changing that big whole section that they're in charge of.
Okay.
And that's where the maze came from, because they might choose, I mean, we've always had a lunch between,
Right.
on the Saturday thing. Well, they may not want that. So they don't, you don't want a shall in there. You want them to have the flexibility to do what they feel is necessary to, or would be helpful to inform the public about what's going on.
Thanks, Wayne.
I mean,
Okay.
I just want to reiterate that if this is the final proposed format, I definitely don't like it. I mean, yeah.
I would love to see that in this,
Yes.
so I can follow it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's also, if you look at it on the legislature's website, like, it's broken down into like chapters essentially, right? You don't really see it here because it's like all at once. But if you look at it the way it actually ends up, like, it makes a little more sense. And
Okay, so
that's
this is
something
not
we
how
can-
it will look as our final, I mean,
We could maybe do some document design. I don't
I
know how
am-
I don't know how
yes.
creative we
I've
can get
honestly
with
given
municipal
me a
charter
headache.
documents, but
Yeah.
if that is something we can do, I imagine I could probably help with it.
Yep.
Is this an okay time for me to make a public comment on just cause eviction? We've talked about it for a long time.
Well,
but
yeah, you
I
can.
wanted to check it about it. So I want to just like as not as a member of the Charter Commission or now the Housing Commission mention that like this is really important to me. You know, I moved here for school many years ago, and one of the reasons that myself and my partner were able to stick around is because we were able to have some stability with renting and renting at like an affordable price. We had a great relationship with our property owner, who was Nelson Fogg at the time, and was, you know, told us when we got there that he was looking to like maintain workforce housing in White River Junction. And that was a big reason that we stayed here, and I was able to be involved in the community and do the things that I'm doing now. Towards the end, after that building changed hands a number of times, our rental situation became increasingly precarious, and we were never sure if we were going to be able to stay in that same apartment. And the rental market got to a place where it wasn't a question of like, maybe we can't renew our lease and we'll find somewhere else in Hartford to live. It was a question of maybe they won't renew our lease and we'll move to a different region because there is, you know, not housing within Hartford. So this is, I think, when I think about this, right, like for that initial relationship I had with my landlord, I don't think that this just cause eviction stuff would ever come up. I think, referencing what Kim was talking about, there's a lot of property owners and developers here who do really have ties to the community, and they're not going to do this kind of thing because they don't want to, and also because it's not the kind of thing that you often do in a small community where you have a reputation. But I think what Kim was talking about too, about larger property management companies coming in that don't have to worry about the reputation, don't know who they're renting to, and are more willing to evict someone who has been there a long time. This is designed to prevent those most egregious offenses. When I look at this, I particularly think about people that have been in their housing for a long period of time, and you know, like Tom said, have been following the rules. And I think that it does, what it would provide is a sense of stability to a lot of renters who have been in the community for a long time and who are following their lease and following the law, knowing that if they are evicted, it will be for a cause, right? And that they're going to be given a reason that they're being displaced from their housing. And I do disagree about this being one-sided. I mean, I think that there's actually quite a bit of care put into making sure that there's flexibility for property owners as well as respecting the property rights. So just as a resident of this town, I wanted to continue to advocate for this with the board.
Cool. Thank you so much. So it seems like, Kim?
We've got two hands up. Let's go with Mike. Go ahead and unmute.
Hello, Mike?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great, thanks, guys. This is a tough issue. I completely
Mike, who?
agree with the principle.
Can you, Mike, can you introduce
idea-
yourself so we know who's speaking?
I'm sorry. Mike Davidson, Tim Store and I run Landforce Home Partners, I'm sorry, no, Executive Suites LLC, and we've added about 130 units to downtown Whitefield and eliminated none. And we've been doing it for a long time. We love the town Hartford most of the time.
Yep.
My challenge here is this. I totally get what this is about, and we've seen the abuses, we understand the abuse, what have you. The problem is, I honor Nelson Bond, by the way, old school guys, got stuff done the right way. We still try to do the same thing. The challenge is this, and I have roughly 8,000 tenant years of management in the Upper Valley, both sides of the river. And I think I've successfully evicted 1 or 0 people, tenants, for reasons other than non-payment. We don't even bother. We just go on, we really work with people. The challenge is, one bad apple can ruin a building and a whole neighborhood. I think some of the folks who are on the board have been around long enough, actually a lot of you guys, do you remember what it looked like in South Maine? The sad part is it's not the good tenants of modest means at all ruin anything, it's the bad tenants, and the people who suffer the most are the good tenants. And this is one of those examples, I believe, and I'm just weighing in, philosophically, I might disagree with it, but I don't disagree with the principle of it, but I don't think it will work, and it doesn't make somebody want to continue the business in Hartford. Not Hartford, the state of Vermont. Nothing personal. We work well together, again, most of the time, try and get stuff done, but this is a recipe for disaster.
Thank you, Mike. We have
Thank
a,
you, guys.
yep. Did we have another comment?
Yes, so now, FX, do you want to speak again?
Yeah, thanks. Mary, challenge accepted. I will get that thing cleaned up. You will love it the next time you see it. I promise you that. And I apologize for how ugly it is, and I thank you for calling me out on it.
Thank you.
Many, many times I looked at it and went, I should really spend, an hour just cleaning this up so that it looks the way I would want it to look.
Great, thank you, FX. All right, so for, Kim?
Well, can I make a comment?
Yes, please just identify yourself.
Yeah, I'm Becca. I've never done this before.
Okay, Becca, do you have a last name? You can.
Shook it, yeah.
Okay.
I live in White River.
Yeah.
So I was no cause evicted 2 summers ago during the national eviction moratorium, which I didn't really know how to respond to. Has anyone in this room been evicted? You can raise your hand.
What is it, national moratorium, eviction moratorium?
During the
Explain that.
During
During
the
the pandemic.
It ended. Yeah, it was like summer 2020, or not 2020, 2021 that I was evicted. And, it was like kind of a surprise. I was always paid rent on time, had kept the apartment very clean, was very like neighborly, friendly with everybody. And one day my landlord showed up and was like, I think she was trying to get around the eviction moratorium by having we're not going to resign the lease to you, but I don't think it was I didn't have to sign this paper saying that I would, and I felt very intimidated. And it kind of felt really bad. And I asked her why she was doing this. I thought I'd been a model tenant. Sorry.
It's okay.
The response she gave was that she thinks everything happens for a reason. And that's messed up. I was really close to hopelessness, which is scary. And we, as a town, need to protect renters. I'm so sorry.
It's okay, don't worry about it. Take the time you need.
it turned out they wanted me out to raise the rent. And they like nearly doubled it. I was paying $800, went up to like $1,500. But it's scary to be evicted, and we need to have protections to make sure it doesn't happen to people. Thank you.
Thank you, Becca.
Oh my God.
You did fine.
I'm so sorry.
Can I speak too?
Yes, just identify yourself. please.
My name is Daryl Sychik. I've been living in Hartford for 6 years, and I'm a teacher. I work at the after-school programs and all over the Upper Valley, and I'm Dan's partner. Yeah, we lived in the same building as Becca, and that apartment was actually, after she was evicted, it was vacant for like months before they found someone who I guess could afford the new rent. So yeah, it was absolutely shocking and devastating, and we loved being her neighbor, and it was awful. Yeah, the renting and housing landscape in our town is unsustainable and unstable, and it has been for a long time. And a just cause eviction clause would just provide a baseline level of stability for renters. That's pretty much it. People already have enough on their plate between the pandemic and the skyrocketing cost of rent, and the fact that this is justified as being the market value when it's often just the price of like living in New York City. It's crazy. If we want to continue to survive, let alone thrive in this community, we need to protect renters, because they are also this town's restaurant workers and teachers and co-op employees and retail workers and artists and organizers, construction workers, volunteers, parents, grandparents, dairy farmers, freelancers, nurses, and childcare workers, just to name a few. Because many of us, well, Dan and I actually just became homeowners because we're very lucky, but many people cannot afford to own property. Just cause eviction simply protects the basic rights of tenants, so they cannot be removed from their homes without just cause. It doesn't take away the rights of property owners. In the relationship between landlord and tenant, the landlord has more power because they have more money. A just cause eviction clause does not take away their power, but simply helps ensure that it is not abused. Evicting someone to increase cash flow is not a just cause. Evicting someone by raising their rent steeply beyond what they can afford is not a just cause. Evicting someone for requesting necessary maintenance to their home is not a just cause. Housing is a human right, and including a just cause eviction clause in our town charter will make Hartford the first town in Vermont to truly honor and protect it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, one more hand, please.
Okay. Alexis?
Hi, this is Alexis Gamba. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Alexis. Go ahead.
So, I have not been evicted, but I did live for many, many years at Oak Knoll. And for the first 10 years, it was great, and then it was bought up by some Massachusetts private equity group. And they just wanted to flip the places. So they started increasing my rent by $300 or $400 per year, or per month per year. And their whole goal was to just drive me out so that they could then flip and sell the place. So I think that kind of, I mean, I've heard you guys talk a lot about how all of our landlords are locals and, you know, how this is going to hurt them, but they're not anymore. There's a lot of out-of-state landlords now who are really just looking to make a profit and driving up the rental market, or driving people out of the rental market just so that they can flip it. And then it ends up sitting vacant because they sell it to someone out of state. So I was very lucky to be able to find a home before I got evicted, but in addition to driving up my rent, they also made changes to the lease that I couldn't contest, such as a 2-month no-fault termination, so that they could kick me out in the middle of a pandemic just because they wrote it into the lease. So I do think that we need more renters protections, and I understand that landlords are concerned that this will create some bureaucracy for them. But if you want to have, a functioning hospital and restaurants and, snowplow guys, we need an affordable housing market here. And, we shouldn't decide not to do it just because we're worried about the legalese and the bureaucracy.
Thank you, Alexis. Wayne, do you have a comment?
Yeah, one of the things that keeps coming up here is the affordable housing market. And from my standpoint, when I look at this, what's needed in the Upper Valley and in Hartford is more projects like Twin Pines that cater to a median income or lower income people. That is what's needed primarily. I have a very difficult time telling landlords that, you are losing control of your property, and we can't get any more people in here that support businesses like Dartmouth College or support the hospital or Dartmouth Hitchcock or the VA. Those people, they're able to pay more money, okay? And that's not, I don't say it's fair or anything, all right? Because life's definitely not fair. But it's a market-driven economy, okay? If you have people coming into the Upper Valley that are able to pay the rents, you're gonna have landlords raising those rents. And the only way that we can make a dent in housing in the Upper Valley is to have the projects like Twin Pines. And I understand that sometimes people don't want to live in multi-unit apartment buildings either. But the way that we're going to control that, I think this is all geared towards controlling costs for tenants. And I agree that we need to do that. But I don't think by controlling costs to tenants, we have to put a burden on landlords because they have the ability to rent to people that are able to pay a higher income. I'm fully supportive of more housing projects such as Twin Pines in the Upper Valley.
Okay, thank you, Lanny.
I think Ally has her hand up.
Hi, Ally, come on in.
Hi, so, yeah, I appreciate being a part of this discussion and also want to acknowledge the folks who bravely shared public comment. I think it brings a humanity, to decision making and to understanding how things are living in the community. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank you. And it reminds us what's at stake, which is important. And and I just want to respond to that last point because, I think it was coming up with what Tom Proctor was sharing around, and I think when he was speaking to Rockwood's question around what other kinds of solutions and that, just cause eviction and this language or proposed language for the charter is not a silver bullet, that we do need many different solutions that are complementing each other, that are addressing different gaps with housing policy, with the rental market, et cetera. And I look at it from a place of, I think maybe it was Daryl who brought up power, and I think that's really important. And as acknowledging the power that we have as elected officials and the profound responsibility of that. And so I think it is our responsibility to take that responsibility seriously and to be noticing who is most vulnerable in our community, who maybe has less power, who maybe has more power, and to use our power responsibly to protect folks who are most vulnerable. So I'm sure we'll get to a point of the discussion if we decide, either now or at another point, how we want to put that specific just cause eviction language forward, whether it's actually in the draft charter that's on the ballot or pull it out as a specific item for the ballot. But I think it is really important that we're having this discussion and that it remains in consideration.
Thank you, Ally. All right, I think, well, hold on a second, Rocket. You can comment, but I wanted to sort of set the parameters what I think we need to do next with the charter. So we're going to hear from the staff there, comments, any concerns, so that we can take those into consideration as we approach like what our revisions are gonna be. So I'd also, recommend everyone go through it again, if there are any questions, or if you have areas that, you think should be changed, or you question why they should be in there, we can have that debate. And finally, I'd just ask you to think about what parts would we recommend to pull out and to vote on separately. And so, and I think FX made a good point, you've got parts of the charter that are sort of like technical, and that we just need to like improve, and you have parts that are substantive that we may want to put to the voters, sensitive topics, like the one we're discussing. So I think that would be our next step with the charter.
Tonight?
No, not tonight.
Oh, okay.
Another meeting, we need to gather the concerns from the staff. Everybody, just look through it, if there's something you don't understand, or if there's something like, I don't think this is a good amendment or a revision of a thing, just like, let's get that together. At some point, we're just gonna have to decide what are the changes we accept, what do we wanna put out to the voters, and what would we just say, let's just get rid of this provision or amend it some other way. And then, I think Rock had a comment, and then Kim.
Yeah, I'm there's so much information about this, and I'm just digesting it. One comment I had for Kim was and it was brought up earlier about out of state. I think Alexis brought it up. Out of state investors coming in and acquiring a bunch of property. There's actually an interesting parallel in which the state legislatures address this with cannabis in terms of limiting licenses. I sort of wonder if there's some either state level or local level tax differential treatment, or I'm just sort of wondering if there's anyone in the room or publicly some sort of statutory powers that the select board can investigate to sort of figure out what other ways we can sort of mitigate that. Because there is a big difference between someone who comes in with a bunch of money just to push, crank rents and flip it, versus people who are really invested in the community and keeping a robust community here, right?
Can I respond to that?
Yes, you
Well,
can.
I think one of the thoughts that I had was, in addition to the language around, what was it, 17C? I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I think like an ordinance could consider a threshold of like, whether it not just be like owner-occupied single or duplex or triplex, that it might be a threshold that's a little higher, that we say something like anyone who manages more than 25 units in the town of Hartford that is not owner-occupied or something like that. So I think that could be addressed in that threshold of because I think that, if you think about someone who might own a home and have an accessory dwelling unit and rent that out or whatever, that's a different category than someone who is doing it as a for-profit.
Yeah, it's very difficult because from like a corporate structure standpoint, you could just form a ton of LLCs, which they do anyway, to own a bunch of different properties, right? In which case, those are never going to cross threshold.
But I guess that's where it could be considered, would be in the ordinance, I would think.
Yeah.
For state law, I'm gonna toot the Hoyt horn. My dad wrote the Land Gains Tax Act in the 1970s, and that was in response to trusts, various corporations, syndicates coming up and buying all the land around Vermont ski areas and just subdividing and turning it into stuff. So the way they addressed it then was they created on a tax on land, particularly like when you bought it, how long you had to keep it before disposing of it, and if you did it, just turned it right over, you'd pay like an incredible amount of tax on that. So that's probably how they do it, because you got to be careful when you're making distinctions between in-state and out-of-state and things like that.
That's true.
So
and
that's one thing,
Like capital gains tax, for example, is intended to incentivize people to hold on to their investments for a longer period. So there might be something like that, but that probably is not within the purview of the select board.
Yeah, that's
the other thing is
we're a little limited.
Right. I think that what Lanny said is true about Twin Pines. I mean, they seem to do amazing projects. The Wentworth presentation we got a few months back was super cool. I want to disagree with you when you say that is the only way forward. I think that one of the true solutions is not just through operations like Twin Pines, but we need development broadly in general. It is so evident in Tom's presentation that we have this gigantic shortage of housing. One of the things that's interesting, and we talked about this with the Lebanon City Council, is that we have this cross-state relationship where we have no control over what happens in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
If you go to Lebanon right now, they're building like crazy, which is very interesting. And so there is this question of what that interplay is between us, because one thing that I think would not be good is if everyone who needed to live affordably lived in Lebanon and then commuted over. I mean, it's not that far, but it would definitely erode and degrade the quality of our community here. And then on the other side, I'm thinking, well, South Main Street, by all accounts, is a much nicer neighborhood to live in now than it was 20 or 30 years ago. So the question you have, too, is to what degree, does someone who took the risk and invested in that community and has owned that community since that era, should they, for taking on that risk and keeping on that long-term investment, be able to profit from that through current market rates? It's a quite open question I have. Okay. The last thing is sort of just in terms of there's this sort of proposition. I've heard about this wealth tax on the national level, and I'll relate it back. But the one problem I've heard with implementing something like that is that wealthy people, part of the reason they're wealthy is because their ability to exploit loopholes. One of the things that they would supposedly do or potentially do is just move their wealth overseas, and you see corporations do this. Mm-hmm. So one of the concerns I have with the tension between government and private enterprise, which include business and landowners, is if we were to pass something like this charter, and then the lead time on this is so long, and by the time the ordinance is enacted, it wouldn't be till sometime next year. One thing that I worry about is, because I see the problem, and your story is very, very moving, the problem is what do we create an incentive then for everyone who says, I'm not sure if I really want to stick it out with this 10 or not? Do we create a flood of no-cause evictions so that people can say, well, I'm going to make sure that the XYZ things happen? You could see people doing things, creating perverse incentives that basically end up creating an unintended negative consequence for our community in our attempt to actually protect those same people. So, I don't know, I'm just sort of... And they might go to Lebanon where there's more housing development, right? Which would be corrosive to our community here. So I just wonder how we balance these things.
Those are all good, very good questions. I don't know that any of us right now has an answer for you, but and that's it. This is one part, I think, of a lot of approaches that people are thinking about when it comes to housing in the Upper Valley. And so I think it's important that we discuss and debate all of them. Kim?
If you want to make a comment, there's one more hand up still.
Okay.
Don't take it. But so are you saying that the questions we've received from staff, we don't want to talk about that tonight?
I don't know that we have all of them. I'd like to get them all
Yeah, we prefer
pulled
to-
together before we do
I mean,
that.
Lisa's so good and
Yeah.
so responsive
Yeah.
and so thorough, but it
But her
won't bother
concerns-
her if just hers isn't addressed. We want to,
Okay.
as staff, do it as a group and present it more.
That's excellent. So we will have an opportunity.
Yes, we will,
I just want to make
definitely,
sure
yep.
that there would be discussion around that. Because it did seem like some of those concerns had been brought to the committee and hadn't been addressed, so I want to make sure there's an opportunity for us to.
Absolutely,
okay.
yes.
And then do you want to take this one?
I will take that one, and then we'll move on from this. Of course, thanking everyone who came in and everyone who's commented. It's been a very, I think, fruitful discussion.
Mike, we have a break coming up here. So.
We'll have a break. We'll have a break after we take the hand, and then we'll come back, go into executive session, and then we'll finish up the meeting. So go ahead, whoever is.
Okay, Beth, go ahead, Beth Long.
Great, thank you. This is Beth Long. I'm from Twin Pines Housing. I will apologize, I was not able to join the meeting early on. I do want to say thank you to those of you who recognize the work we do. And Twin Pine Housing, we have a lot of sympathy for those that are looking for housing and need housing, and we understand completely the need in the community for affordable housing. Having said that, we would like more time to consider this issue. Our initial reaction is that to create more obstacles for landlords is not the solution to creating more housing. And we hope that the select board does not rush into this. We think this has the potential of actually having the reverse impact on the availability of rentals in the community, and we are looking for a longer time frame. We only saw this agenda item today, and we would like further time to discuss it, but hope that this isn't rushed into, because we know how difficult it is to develop housing, and we feel that this could potentially have a negative impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. And, with this issue in particular, I could imagine a situation where this is, discussed at a candidates night or an information night or a public hearing before it got, placed on the ballot, which, we don't even know the time frame whether that would be at this point possible for this March. But yeah, we don't have any intent to rush through, and, we have some decisions, I think, to make about how this would be presented if it was something we wanted, to be something like, that could be in the charter, voted on by the people. I think there'll be plenty of time to have a hearing. Yes, Kim?
My apologies. So we're not still on course to have this on the March 23 ballot?
I thought we were.
I'm gonna say we don't know yet.
Okay.
We can discuss that further.
Because we can't discuss it with the town meeting cycle unless it's
That's
on
the
the
whole
ballot.
objective of this being brought before us, the time period it was, is in order to get this on the charter, on the ballot.
I know,
so-
and we'll see where we're at. I can't make a promise that it's gonna be on there based on,
That's why the
information.
need is to separate contentious issues and have those issues, and then have them still on the ballot, and have them discussed at open, meeting nights. And
All right,
that way
well,
they can
we
be.
will discuss the timeline. I'm not saying it's gonna be on, I can't guarantee that it'll be on there.
Good.
But I know, Lynn, yep.
Can you ask FX what the timeline is? Because he and Lisa have worked out what the timeline is, when you guys have to have a final decision.
And
You
Ally
can,
does-
I mean, we have to have a final decision to get it on for this year,
Yeah,
but
and FX and Lisa have discussed.
FX, do you want to respond to that, or Lisa?
Wow.
And then Ally has her hand up again. Why don't we go to Ally first and then,
yeah,
They don't have their hands up, so-
this,
Can I just speak?
yeah, Paula, please.
One
jump
of
in.
the reasons we need to clarify with the committee, as far as withdrawing this as the final draft, we needed to have that answered first. So in speaking with Lisa, and I feel confident speaking with her, and myself, who've managed the town meeting cycle over the last several years, without knowing that answer, we had no real direction as to how we proceeded, because the way our current charter is, it pulled us away from the statutes and the expectations and the calendar and the schedule. So it was really impossible for us to figure out how we were going to do this based on the current reading of that language in the charter. So I can't, as I said, staff needs to review, the school board needs to review, the select board needs to gather and come up with everything that they want. There's a little bit of misunderstanding, I think, with the changes having been brought forth to an attorney. That particular attorney who works with the noble Paul Giuliani and learned from him, that attorney at no point thought that changes being presented to him were for a final version. So there's a lot of work to do to get this on the 2023 ballot. And one of the big concerns of staff that I am comfortable sharing is the public outreach that does need to happen, and that the school board, even while there's very little in the charter that does affect them, it's a process with them too. And I've spoken to Tom DeBalsi about it as well, and he did, along with us, share pretty grave concerns about rushing through this to get it on 2023. So that's from the administrative standpoint.
To be determined.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes?
I might add, if we do not get this 2023, we are apt to lose money from local option sales tax we will lose money from local option sales tax.
Right, from cannabis.
Yeah, but we're losing, if we added a 1%, we're losing that anyhow from all the sales that, we're not taxing it on at this point.
If we add a one, yeah, we're not gonna make it, yeah.
We won't lose it, we just won't.
Yeah,
We just won't gain
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Well,
That's
that's
makes
cost, opportunity cost.
Yes.
So,
Or you run the opportunity, or you run the risk of presenting something that's not quite ready, and then you lose it for another year, so just more thoughts.
yeah.
FX has his hand up.
Okay, let's hear from FX, but then we're gonna take the break, so we need to go into executive session. So FX?
Yeah, I guess what I want to say is that, the process for getting the charter change in, includes, a significant amount of public commentary and, an opportunity for both boards, to look at the changes that have been proposed. We got this in front of you essentially in the form that it is now, back in September. We did get feedback from the town clerk that we responded to and considered. And I believe that, there really isn't, there are no significant challenges to this going forward. We've got from now until the end of January, when the final language gets voted for the ballot, to work through all of these things. And I have no doubt that, we'll be able to accomplish that. With a charter change, your first public hearing, it does not have to be set in stone at that point, because the provision is that after the first public hearing, then the respective boards have an opportunity to consider what they've heard at that and to respond and make changes that are then presented for the final vote. And we've got, 7 weeks, which really ought to be plenty of time, particularly given the fact that over the course of the next month, leading up to the first public hearing at Info Night, there'll be an opportunity to work through, any additional suggestions or changes, and to make decisions about what will be carved out to be voted on separately. So I don't really see a problem with the timeline. I guess, we worked very hard to make sure that what we presented to you would be a solid foundation to go forward. And we conducted an extensive amount of outreach, and we took in an extensive number of comments. And I think that as a committee, we're prepared to defend and explain what was presented. So I would, I think that rather than sowing fear, uncertainty, and doubt at this point, we should really be engaged with the idea that come March, there is going to be a question on the ballot, or questions on the ballot, that the town as a whole will be able to grapple with. Now, once that's done, if there are people in town, including people on staff, who feel that something is ill-considered, they have every right to go in front of the government ops committees in the legislature, in the House and the Senate, making the case that something should not be in or should be altered in some fashion. This is by no means the end of, the end of anything. I would point out the same thing to folks who are concerned about the just cause eviction. And, you know, I was the other vote, you know, opposed to including it as part of the charter. I felt that we should have presented it as a separate item. But, you know, that said, there is, like I say, this is a process. This is a process that first involved the committee, now it involves the board, then it will involve the citizens, then it will involve the boards again, and then it will involve the citizens again, and then it will involve the state legislature.
FX? Sorry to interrupt you. Could you help me out here again, because you're speaking with so much detail. It would be really helpful if you could recommend us a specific bullet-pointed timeline as to how we could move forward with expediency through all the necessary steps so that we can get this through. I understand that your perspective is FX. I understand that your perspective may have be in difference with the rest of the charter committee, as you were one of the dissenting votes on that. That's fine, but clearly you have a very nuanced procedural understanding of this. Is very difficult, again, sort of, this might be my own shortcoming here, but to hold this volume of information in and all these different steps, it's very difficult to just retain. If you could send an email to the rest of the board that we can refer to as to your recommendation as to the best next steps so that we can ensure that the charter can get on to a 23 vote.
I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
I've got a document like that, and I'll get that out later this week.
Thank you, FX. All right, we're gonna take a break till 20 past, so I'm just gonna do 5 this time, and then we'll come back, go into executive session, and finish up the meeting. So we'll see you all in 5. You're gonna come into executive session?
Yeah, I'll,
Yeah, okay,
I'll run it.
Do we have to sign anything?
good. I signed my stuff already.
It's not a regular meeting.
Thank you, Dan, for asking.
But I think she said it's not
Yeah.
regular.
You guys might not have anything.
So,
No, you
this
do
is
not.
a regular meeting next week.
Every meeting's regular now, every Tuesday.
I just look on my calendar and it's just meeting.
But thank you for asking. I appreciate it.
Then we take a break to see Trevor in Utah.
I don't know.
I was not here.
I thought there was a symbol up there. Yeah, isn't it up at the top? Doesn't it say mute or not?
I can't tell. In the corner? Well, there is something up in the corner, but I can't.
Oh, it says recording.
So,
We don't need to sign today.
No, this is not a regular meeting. Next Tuesday, I'll have a whole bunch of stuff. Thank you for asking. Thursday's budget, this is special charter.
You're a special.
Budget, thank you. Next, regular, next Tuesday. That's when I need your, commission reports by then. I mean, you know, I know you're gonna, once in a while I get one from you.
Oh, yeah.
Commission reports. Keep sister cities.
Sorry. I'm confused about the one that is with Paul, actually, that's correct.
Oh, as far as with her, I don't know.
Oh, you were at my high school history class, and nobody knew from
No, I'm good, I'm just.
Oh.
Yes, you did.
Right now?
Nancy used to do a pen.
There's a letter in the town report that comes from there's a letter,
I would love to be able to use it.
and generally there's a discussion among the board on the cherry play rights. But you can line up your committees.
I gotta get us like 18 hours of Zoom already this week. I know.
So, this is, does Matt go to historic preservation?
I know Dan
Osborne is now. Okay, so they always get their stuff.
I don't know the names of all that being.
Sisters.
I can.
They would be reminded that.
There was a gentleman with her.
Yeah, he was just driving.
Wait, he wasn't really with me. I did tonight. It's like,
I forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you
And I'll even stay for that. This is getting great.
How are you?
Yeah, they need it for, oh my God, perfectly good.
So now we go into executive session.
Back everything they become adults, they don't remember. And,
Are we muted?
yeah, I mean, the same was
No.
true for me. I mean, I studied political science.
I know what you're thinking.
No, I don't think you do. It's,
I do.
It's, I don't think you do. It's actually, it's not about the discussion today. It's like something different. It's weighing
Weighing on you?
Oh, yeah. A couple things here in this town. Weighing on me. These small little shoulders and that.
So,
I see you're looking for a mentor for your.
Good night.
David,
Good night, Dan. Good night, Lynn.
Bye.
Good to see you.
Have you had anybody reply to your mentor
I
request?
did, yeah. Yeah, a couple.
Where do you go? I'm gonna
Hopefully one of them pans out.
Okay, just let me know if she's not here. Yeah.
I see you're a reader of the listserv.
Yes.
Wasn't a hurry last time.
Faithfully every morning.
I bet you read it thoroughly too. I'm not a great reader of it. I skim the bullets.
I do read it quite thoroughly. I should read 7 days, but I don't subscribe to 7 days. They do have some pretty good articles that pop every once in a while.
They do, and Digger does really nice articles too. Valley News does do good articles, but they do some good articles. But they cover New Hampshire.
Yeah, I think so. Vermont Standard sometimes covers actually better than the Valley News does. This is really disappointing. Valley News is very disappointing.
Well, I will tell you why I was disappointed. I subscribe to the paid.
Thank you.
Good idea. The paid newspaper, like the physical, didn't show up. Never showed up for months. I kept waiting. Couldn't get it. Just canceled it.
You're not missing much some days.
Well, yeah. I like
Monday's newspaper is pretty thin.
Well, local news is great though. I love it.
It's like a pamphlet.
Yeah, but it's pretty, the newspaper now, ever since they changed the layout of it and when they moved everything for printing down in Concord,
Yeah.
it went downhill fast.
Yeah, look, the Sunday section used to actually be really good. Like, they have a business section, so you learn about all the local stuff. Like, there's a lot more coverage, I think.
Now it's definitely, I mean, I really still like the idea of sitting with the newspaper, reading the newspaper, watching, and then drinking a cup of coffee. But I miss that because you can get through the newspaper one sip of coffee now.
You remember the one called The Spectator? It was like our competitor for a while.
Yeah.
It was like printing the police logs, like the DV logs that like the Valley News doesn't really do, Like it was like the tabloid competitor. That was a good one.
Vacationing before.
Right.
You know who does a really good job is Daybreak. They do
They do a good job.
Daybreak does a decent job, yeah.
I don't think anybody does that.
Yeah,
But
thank you.
You want,
Do you have
Just waiting for the jam guy.
Not with me. I can leave you a hard copy.
if you put one in
I
the
went
drawer,
down to
or I can try to remember to.
Well, I have to come and put the agendas out anyway.
Okay,
whether or
I'll
not.
leave one.
so just leave one for me, that would be great.
I might myself a note.
And so I rented.
All right,
a place
you guys ready to come back?
for a guy. I rented
Almost.
Yeah.
If you're ready. All right, so we are back from our break, and I will take a motion to go into executive session.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to discuss attorney-client communications in respect to the new open meeting law allegations of Remington, Nevin received on November 16, 2022, and that in accordance with Vermont Open Meeting Law 1 V.S.A, Section 313, and discuss confidential attorney-client communications of which premature general public knowledge clearly place the public body of persons involved with substantial disadvantage in the appointment or evaluation of a public officer or employee.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Lanny will second. I just want to make sure Ally's on.
I'm gonna call her.
Okay.
Let me go, because I'm gonna log out of Zoom.
All right, great. Okay, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and we're going into executive session.
Wonderful time. Thank you.
And David, you're gonna stay, right?
Hot toddy. Think of you. I'll leave that there for tomorrow morning. Bye, Lana, thank you. Bye, Lana.
Thanks, Lana.
Thank you all.
So we're gonna have a motion from Lanny, we're gonna have 4 separate motions from Dan, and we're gonna have a motion from...
I'll second everything.
There we go. See how efficient we can be when we put our hands together? We all play an assigned role.
Give me an easy job to do.
God, we got another meeting on Thursday.
Now, wait,
And then Tuesday again, right?
and then next Thursday again.
I'm zooming in from Trinidad and Tobago.
On
Thursday?
From the 10th.
On Thursday?
No, I'll be here this Thursday, but then
Okay.
I'll be gone for a couple of weeks, so might be a couple of meetings. but-
What are you gonna do?
All right, are we on? Can you hear us? Okay. Lanny, would you
Mr.
like?
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we come out of executive session.
Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Any seconds? All right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. All right, Dan.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion. I move to find that the failure of the Select Board not to amend its agenda to appoint the members of the cast at the beginning of the meeting on November 15, 2022 violated the Vermont open meeting law.
I second the motion.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Wait, I'm sorry. So Dan made, Mary seconded?
Yes.
I think that might be the pattern for the next couple. So. Dan?
I'd like to make a motion. I move to find that the town charter was not violated since due notice of the cast appointees were provided by way of the Select Board meeting of August 16th, 2022.
I second the motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'd like to make a motion. I move to remedy the violation by ratifying the appointments to the cast made on November 15th, 2022, and noticed as part of the agenda today as John Reed, Planning Commission 2024, Laura Simon, Resilient Hartford 2023, Carolyn Hooper, Resilient Hartford 2025, Lee Michaelides, Conservation Commission 2025, Jesse Pollard, Hartford Energy Commission 2024, Molly Smith-Dunn, Hartford Energy Commission 2025, and Ashton Todd, Hartford Energy Commission 2023.
I second the motion.
Got a second, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous, and Dan?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion. I move to remedy the violation by requiring each Select Board member to review the relevant Vermont statutes to refresh the relocation of the requirements of amending the agenda.
Friendly amendment?
Yes.
Recollection, not relocation?
Oh, recollection, sorry. Yes, thank you.
I second the motion.
Any discussion on that one? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Mr. Chair?
Kim?
I move that a one-time exception to the personnel policy be made for the payment of 41 hours of vacation time to acting town manager Gal Ostrat, effective pay date December 15, 2022.
I second the motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Ally?
Yeah, I have a comment,
Unanimous.
which is that I just want to express our appreciation for the fact that Gail and Paul both have stepped up and done extra service to our town, and that, as I'm sure, it just feels like a sacrifice to give up time, even though you're being compensated for it. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you, Rob.
Was that unanimous?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great, okay.
Okay, there's no consent agenda. I will take a motion to adjourn the Select Board meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Dan seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. All right, thanks, everybody.
Hi, Ally.
Bye, Ally.
Are we muted?